assisting us tonight. I now call to the table Australian and International Pilots Association. Well, welcome Mr Mackerras and Mr Safe. I would invite you to make a brief opening statement if you would care to do so, otherwise we can get straight into the questions.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you to the committee for the opportunity to appear before you tonight on an issue that the Pilots Association holds very dear to its heart. The Australian and International Pilots Association, APA, is the largest association of professional airline pilots in Australia. We represent over 2,300 professional airline transport category flight crew, and we are a key member...
Sorry, how many?
Over 2,300.
2,300.
And we are a key member of the International Federation of Airline Pilot Associations, which represents over 100,000 pilots in 100 countries. Importantly, and in the context of this inquiry, we represent nearly all Qantas mainline pilots and a significant percentage of pilots flying for the various Qantas subsidiaries. APA and its members will be around for as long as the Qantas business continues to exist. I think it's fair to say that we will outlast any board member or chief executive officer, and that we are committed to the long-term viability, success and prosperity of the business, and since privatisation, we think that the ongoing viability of Qantas as a business is even more important. This inquiry is about changing one of the fundamental bases of the privatisation of Qantas. APA is not against change. Aviation and the broader world of which it is part are constantly evolving, and change is part of our everyday lives. But change for change's sake is not evolution. If conducted in ignorance, it can be destructive to the very people and institutions it is intended to assist. In 1998, the Productivity Commission published its report on international air services. And as far as we can see, that document still drives the Australian policy settings for international air services and has largely led to our current circumstances. Since 1998, we've seen the fall of Ansett, and we've seen the rise of several key government-backed state carriers into the Australian market. We in APA believe in two rules about change. First, don't change anything until you understand how it got there in the first place. And second, don't change anything when you can't control the effect on things that are important to you. For the last 3 or 4 years, APA has been seeking multi-partisan support for a Productivity Commission review of the 1998 report to provide the basis to update our current aviation policy settings. The world in which Qantas competes is vastly different to the world of 1998, and it has long been clear to us that a number of market distortions have arisen, and our policy settings often make things worse than they do better. We need the people who made our current aviation policy direction to have a good look at the outcomes, to look at today's environment, and to give some advice on how best governments can either lead or get out of the way of Australia's aviation system. APA has the view that the Qantas Sale Amendment Bill 2014 is a very blunt instrument to fix a problem that has largely been illuminated in speeches and press releases, while totally lacking in any truly objective analysis. We do not believe that the national interest will be protected by benevolent businessmen, since they now seem few and far between. APA sees protection of the national interest as the role of government, and we are very concerned that this bill in its current form is very much at risk of throwing out the baby with the bathwater. To conclude these remarks, I would just like to summarise the key points of our submission that you have received. They are, firstly, amending the Qantas Sale Act 1992 is necessary to level the playing field among Australian international airlines if the Virgin restructure is not to be publicly examined. Secondly, amending the Qantas Sale Act 1992 does not have to be a binary outcome of simply repeal or retain. Thirdly, the 25% and 35% foreign ownership limits serve no useful purpose and should be repealed. The 49% foreign ownership limit for Qantas should be regulated by an amended Section 11A of the Air Navigation Act 1920. Further amendments to the Qantas Sale Act 1992 must be matched with a strengthening of the Air Navigation Act 1920. The discretionary requirements in the Department's International Airline Licence Guidance Notes must be imported into the Air Navigation Act 1920 by way of incorporation of principal place of business and effective regulatory control provisions. Seventhly, repeal of the national interest facilities provisions of the Qantas Sale Act 1992 should be considered only after an urgent Productivity Commission review of its 1998 report on international air services. It should not be driven by Qantas fleet decisions and an absence of active departmental regulation. Thank you again for the opportunity to appear.
Thank you, Mr. Safe. Mr. McCarris, I take it you don't have an opening statement as well?
No.
Okay. Thank you. Just an opening question. Your membership, does that come from all airlines in Australia?
No, it's Qantas Group. We're only authorised under the rules to carry Qantas Group.
Okay. Now, you say that you acknowledge the need to make changes to the Qantas Sale Act with a view to levelling the playing field. We've had evidence from Qantas today or tonight that to level the playing field, they need to be on an equivalent legislative and regulatory regime as their competitors. You're suggesting, or are you suggesting, that the changes or the amendments to the bill that you're talking about apply only to Qantas, or are you suggesting that those amendments should also apply to Virgin?
No, we're saying, you're talking about the Air Navigation Act 1920?
Well, you suggest here, you say that you're happy with that the Qantas Sale Act needs to be amended, but you don't like the bill that we're looking at tonight because it's a blunt instrument and there's a few things that you'd like to be done differently. Should that apply to Virgin as well?
We begin from the backdrop of this issue is now concentrated on a binary question of repeal the Sale Act or retain the Sale Act, and we think there's a lot more to this issue than the Sale Act. We think that the Productivity Commission of 1998 and its findings and the regulatory settings that have flowed out of that have been a significant contributor to why we're even now having a debate about the Sale Act now in 2014. So we're saying that you're putting, by just looking at the Sale Act in isolation and not looking at the broader regulatory constraints on all airlines, including Qantas, you're putting the cart before the horse in that sense.
Well, the question that I'm asking though, the intention of this bill is to provide a level playing field so that Qantas can compete on even terms with its major competitors in Australia, and have the flexibility to be able to do whatever is required to meet the challenges that it faces in future. You acknowledge the need to make or to level that playing field. If we were to put in place what you're suggesting, you say that the foreign ownership issues are fine; they could go through, but other aspects of repealing the bill you have some concerns about.
Yes.
Should those concerns be applied to all of Qantas's competitors as well? When you talk about levelling the playing field, are you talking about actually delivering that, or still leaving some differences between the regulatory environment under which Qantas operates vis-a-vis its competitors?
Yes, thanks.
Chair, the particular suggestion about importing the International Airline Licence Guidance Notes requirements into the Air Navigation Act are designed, in fact, to apply a similar regulatory field to all Australian airlines. So what actually happens at the moment, and I'm sure that the departmental officers behind me may disagree with this, at the moment there's a lot being said about the fact that the other airlines are subject to similar restrictions to Qantas because of restrictions under the Air Navigation Act. The Air Navigation Act does not include those restrictions. What the Air Navigation Act does is provide a head of power for licensing. When you go to to be carried out through the regulations, when you go to the regulations, they actually don't provide specific requirements. Those requirements are administered by the department under a discretionary set of guidance notes. What we're saying is, before we take large slabs of particularly the facilities protection provisions out of the Sale Act, then we should amend the Air Navigation Act to provide a level playing field for all operators.
So you want those aspects of the facilities protection incorporated into the Air Navigation Act and to apply to all Australian airlines?
What we're actually talking about is the current restrictions on board membership, on operational bases.
So you're looking at extending that from its current operation?
No, what we're proposing, what we're proposing is that the current restrictions to all other airlines are elevated into the Air Navigation Act, and they become the replacement for Section 71H of the Qantas Sale Act.
So that would There'd be more specificity, though,
Yes, there
applying
would.
to Virgin, for example, than currently does?
All that would happen is it would become part of the Act rather than a part of a licensing system administered at the discretion of the Secretary.
Okay, so you're not actually
Department.
arguing for any different outcomes to what is currently delivered under the discretion of the Secretary. You're saying you just like it firmed up?
Yes, we would like to put it bluntly, to take it out of the hands of the department and into a more transparent realm where it's controlled by the Parliament.
Okay, but reflecting what the current situation is as it applies to other airlines like Virgin.
The others. And the only rider to that is the fact that before we go there, what we're suggesting is that the Productivity Commission really should look at those policy settings so that we know when we remove 7.1H out of this Qantas Sale Act, we have a very good idea of what the likely impact will be. At the moment, we're proposing to remove it, but I don't think we really know what the consequences will be, and that's what concerns us about that.
Now, to some extent, as I understand it, the discretion is supplied to the Secretary of the Department because it reflects the requirements in bilateral and multilateral air services agreements. Is that correct?
I believe that is correct, but
would this have some impact on that? Or?
no, it would not. And what we've actually proposed is that when Nathan read out the bit about the incorporation, principal place of business and effective regulatory controls, they're the alternative framework for air service agreements, as opposed to majority or substantial ownership and effective control. So the suggestion we're making was that they can actually be imported in the Act as a parallel requirement, which won't affect anybody currently, but what it means is that it then requires that if, for instance, you wish to start up an airline, you would have to be incorporated in Australia, your chairman would have to be Australian, all those sorts of things. And they would then allow us, as we move into the future, in the next 20 years, we'd only have to remove these, if we did shift eventually to principal place of business, we only have to remove one little bit of the Air Navigation Act to solve the problem.
Okay, so in summary, you're happy with the foreign ownership changes that are incorporated in this bill. You're happy with the outcomes that are currently delivered under the Air Navigation Act, but you would like to see that firmed up through some further regulatory legislation.
When you say we're happy with the foreign ownership aspects of the bill, we're certainly content with the 25% and 35% limit going. We say the 49% aspect warrants further investigation beyond just that provided by the Senate inquiry, where we would prefer to see that examined in more detail. And that's why we have suggested that before the 49% be abolished, that it be examined by an agency over a longer period with more resources devoted to it.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Mr. Soap and Captain McKerris. So if the Act, Section 7 was repealed and it went to 51%, is APO, without any changes, do APO see a problem there?
The problem is people get caught up in the 49% prong of the Qantas Sale Act, but they forget that even if that is removed, the Air Navigation Act still applies, and in order for an international airline to access our air service agreements, they can't be more than 49% foreign ownership, except in the case of either being Qantas, because the Air Navigation Act currently excludes Qantas as an international airline in its definitions, or by replicating Virgin's structure and setting up an international division which you use to access the air service agreements, which is separate from your domestic business, which may be entirely foreign owned.
Okay, well, I'll come back on another angle if I can through you, Chair. And from my point of view, where I refuse to support the repeal, is that while there is 49% foreign ownership and no more Australian jobs, there are conditions that Australian jobs stay in Australia, and I won't be persuaded otherwise. So of all the Qantas pilots, and that's Jetstar as well?
Yes, we have many Jetstar members.
Okay. So you have 2,300 members. How many pilots are employed by Jetstar and Qantas?
My understanding is Qantas mainline is currently excluding those on leave without pay to fly with other carriers.
Sure.
Around 2,000, maybe a touch over.
Okay.
And I think Jetstar is around 800 pilots in total, maybe a little more by now.